You think you missed God's answer, but that's not what actually happened. What if I told you that God already answered you and you simply didn't recognize it? Not because he was silent, but because no one ever taught you how he actually speaks. Before we continue, I need to tell you something. I'm going to show you something here that most people completely miss. Something that can change the way you see all of this. So make sure you subscribe to the channel because the next videos will go even deeper into this. And you won't want to miss it. There's a huge difference between God not answering and you not recognizing the answer. If you've been following my last videos, we talked about putting God first. We talked about how certain ways of praying might actually be blocking you, and we also talked about how God has already answered you. But this is what changes everything, because it's not enough to seek answers if you can't recognize them when they come. Most people miss God's answer for one simple reason. They expect God to move the way they imagine. They're waiting for something big, obvious, impossible to miss. An audible voice, an instant miracle, a perfect sign. And when that doesn't happen, they assume, God didn't answer me. But the Bible teaches that God speaks in many different ways, often subtle, in silence, in details, in unexpected paths. And that's exactly where many people get lost, because they're looking for something extraordinary, while God is moving in the ordinary. Let me tell you a story. Sabrina and Andrew were going through a difficult season in their marriage and finances, but it wasn't a loud crisis. It was a silent daily wave that kept building over time. Conversations became shorter, worries increased, and everything started to feel heavy. Still, they had one thing in common. They prayed every day. They asked God for change, for direction, for a clear answer. Sabrina had a more immediate emotional faith. She believed something big could happen soon. Andrew, on the other hand, was more tired. He prayed, but carried doubts in his heart. Then, an opportunity appeared. Andrew received a job offer that looked exactly like the answer he had been praying for. Stability, better pay, a fresh start. He was excited and told Sabrina, "I think God is answering us." But at the final stage, something unexpected happened. The job offer was canceled. No clear explanation. Just a simple message saying the position had been closed. Andrew was shocked. He didn't understand it. He came home frustrated, quiet, and after a while he said something painful. "If God is listening, why did this happen now?" Sabrina was shaken too, but her reaction was different. She didn't have answers, but she felt something strange inside, not logical certainty, but a quiet sense that this wasn't the end of the story. The following days were hard. Andrew became more distant, more closed off. Sabrina tried to hold on to faith, but she also felt the weight of uncertainty. And during that time, something started happening without them realizing it. A few weeks later, another opportunity came for Andrew. But this one was different. It wasn't just a better job. It was a more stable company, stronger structure, and conditions that slowly started to make more sense than the first offer ever did. But there was one important detail. This second opportunity would not have existed if the first one had worked out. At first, Andrew didn't see that. To him, it was just a replacement. But over time, he began noticing details he had missed before. The first opportunity had hidden instability, internal changes, and risks he didn't know about. And that's when Sabrina said something that stayed with him. What if what we thought was the answer was actually protection? Napoleon Hill once said that what you don't recognize, you cannot use to your advantage. And Andrew realized they had almost lost something better, because they only saw what was taken, not what was being protected. But the process didn't stop there. Even with the new opportunity, the beginning wasn't easy. It wasn't instant. It wasn't comfortable. Andrew had to learn new skills, adjust, and deal with pressure. At times, he even thought, did I make another mistake? But something was different now. He was no longer guided only by results, but by something he couldn't explain, peace. And that confused him, because everything around him still felt uncertain. But inside, something felt steady. Sabrina noticed it first. She said, "It's not that everything got easy, but we stopped fighting what's happening." And that changed everything, because slowly, what looked like delay started to make sense. What looked like loss turned into protection, and what looked like silence started revealing direction. And this is exactly where most people miss it, because they are waiting for God to answer one way, while He is already answering another. The Bible teaches that God guides steps, not just destinations. David often spoke about being guided. It wasn't about seeing everything, it was about trusting direction. King Solomon taught that there are paths that seem right, but in the end, lead to destruction. And often God's answer is not opening a door, but closing the one that would take you away from your purpose. Jesus showed that God's timing is never late. It is perfect. What feels like delay to us is often unseen alignment. Florence Scovel suggested that what looks like a pause is often invisible preparation. And Rick Warren says that God is not only interested in speed, but in direction. And when Andrew finally understood that, something shifted inside him. He started to realize that God had never been silent. He had been guiding him in ways he didn't know how to recognize before. So listen carefully. You were not being ignored. You were being guided in a way you just hadn't learned to recognize yet. And when you understand that, everything changes. You stop asking, where is God? And start asking, where am I not paying attention? And suddenly, you start seeing God everywhere. That closed door, that delay, that feeling you couldn't explain. That was not absence, that was an answer. If this made sense to you, someone else probably needs to hear it too. Share this video with them. If this video helped you in any way, make sure to subscribe to the channel. That's how I know I should keep creating this kind of content. And if you made it this far, comment, "I made it," so I know who actually watched until the end. Because the moment you start listening differently, your entire life begins to change.